and welcome back to the channel. I am your host Muriel, and in this video I'd like to share a review of, rant about, a book I DNF'd last year titled The Mimameid Solution, written by Catherine Kempf. I wouldn't normally do this with a book I didn't finish, but I did read just over half of it. I DNF'd at 52%, and the stuff I read included pretty egregious example of what I'm going to call cultural misappropriation, so I'm making an exception. First, a basic idea of the premise. Sometime in the not-so-distant future, think about 100 years from now was my best guess at any rate, and at most, humanity has been wrecked by climate change, risen sea levels, and some sort of volcanic winter that has decimated plant crops, agriculture as a whole, and thus the broader food supply chain. Zooming in on Europe, the Irish of Ulster, presumably, so that's the northern part of the island, have taken over the island of Ireland as a whole, have mass converted the population to some sort of neo-Druidic religion, and conquered the island of Britain, starting with the neighbouring Scots, I assume. They then decided to do what I called a reverse Viking and go a-raiding and a pillaging along the shores of Scandinavia. And not, the closer northern coasts of France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Yikes. For resources and ultimately a new homeland, because presumably the islands of Ireland and Great Britain have been flooded, I guess. Against this, let's be real, rather ludicrous backdrop, which I will come back to, the story follows a couple of Scandinavian characters, barely surviving in the wintry wilderness, as they get picked up and brought home by a security detail from Mimameid, an underwater techno-bunker society dedicated to some sort of revived Norse religion and, more importantly, the continued existence of Scandinavian peoples. Just like with my recent review of This Is How You Lose the Time War, I'm mostly going to structure my review of and rant about the Mimameid solution around a couple of positives and then negatives, which will chiefly focus on world building. So starting with a couple of positives, I'll admit I thought the book's post-apocalyptic techno-bunker society premise was, decently intriguing on its own. Same more or less went for the book's "we're gonna do a reverse Viking with peeps from the Hiberno British Islands" idea. If only because it strongly reminded me, in part at least, of the bear with me, Luck of the Irish achievement you can get in EU4, and that, in itself, was somewhat chuckle-worthy. If you don't know what EU4 is, it's a grand strategy game that takes place in like the early modern period. My partner plays it a lot and I played it with him, so that's the reference. So I'll reluctantly give the book that. That kind of made me chuckle at first. I also found the book's prose fluid overall. There was good descriptive writing, I'll give it that. And the text itself read pretty quickly, which turned out to be a very good thing since I wouldn't have made it to 52% otherwise. The dialogues were fine as well, from a structural and these humans sound human point of view. Speaking of which, the Mimameid solution is a multiple point of view story. You alternate between said point of views every chapter, and the character work was overall fine, from what I could tell, or rather pay attention to when I wasn't losing my mind from the world building and cultural stereotyping. More on that in a second. So yeah, from a cultural identity standpoint, the character work was borderline offensive, but again, more on that in a second. But from an expressed individuality standpoint, it was fine. The characters felt sufficiently distinct from one another, like actual human beings. You get the gist, the end. With that out of the way, I can move on to the world building and the borderline offensive shit. Like I said, I found the book's basic premises decently intriguing on their own, even the inarguably more memey at the outset one of having the Irish colonize the British Isles, mass convert to neo-paganism, and invade Scandinavia. Alas, the execution of said basic premises was an abject failure, because the world building needed to create solid, believable foundations for all of that to actually work was entirely missing. A lot of things did not make any sense from a strictly post-apocalyptic survival point of view, or felt inconsistent, like sudden access to certain kinds of resources that had previously been established to be rare, scorched earth raiding tactics employed by people otherwise looking for viable land to settle, or cultural and linguistic takeovers that would make an iota of sense without the presence of state governments, which, wouldn't you know, had moreover been established in text to have collapsed, and other things of that general nature. This major issue was further compounded by the fact I'm pretty sure the story took place in the not-so-distant future. Nothing specific was ever given in terms of dates or broader timelines, but judging by the general level of tech people claim they'd only just recently lost access to, I'd say the book's plot can't have taken place more than one, maybe two generations at the absolute maximum from now. No more than 100 years, basically, like I said earlier. And so concerning what the book stated regarding the radical shifts in religious and linguistic practices and cultural hegemony specifically, well, there is no way in hell any of that makes any kind of goddamn sense within a 50 to, yes, even 100 years time frame. Especially once again given the absence of stable or even semi-stable centralized state institutions. And then shit actually got offensive in places, because a lot of the book's cultural world-building, which centers on two key player factions, because this is a Mimi EU4 campaign more than anything else at the end of the day, the Norse and the Celts, there's a reason why I'm doing this, relied on gross stereotypes and hand-waved away the fact these groups were extrapolated from real, living cultures with real, layered histories. This is especially true when it comes to the book's Celts. Or rather Irish, really, because I mean it all fucking starts in Ireland, so like, don't believe me? Fair enough. Here are some examples of what I mean. The Finns and Sami people were at times included under the Norse umbrella, which is incorrect, and you shouldn't do that, especially not with the Sami, so there's that. Though this wasn't done consistently either, so problem with the book's editing, perhaps? A bigger one that legitimately made me lose my mind for a hot second, like audibly lose my mind. I was just going nuts over this. Two Norse characters laugh at the fact whiskey translates to water of life in Irish. Yes, the language is called Irish, by the way, in English, not Gaelic. You're welcome for the PSA. And I was like, excuse me, what? What? Have you never heard of aquavit, my dude? I probably mispronounced that in like Swedish, Norwegian, etc. Apologies for that, but aquavit, if you want to look that up. Clearly the answer is no. It is a spirit from Scandinavia that literally means water of life. Oh my god. Because it comes from the Latin aqua vitae. And so guess what? We have it in French too. In French, it's eau de vie, literally means water of life. I checked and it also exists in Slavic languages. Literally 2 seconds on a search engine will show you this. This shit is borderline pan-European, so riddle me this. Why the fuck would Scandinavian people find this weird or funny in the slightest? Tell me you know nothing about actual European cultures, well tell me you know nothing about actual European cultures, or at the very least, that you don't know how to do your bloody research. My god. Excerpt time! She had thought it was so ridiculous at the time that the Celts didn't just adhere to the same passage of time as the rest of the known world. Just, please kill me now. Again, why would these supposedly Norse or Scandinavian characters acting like peeps from the relatively neighboring British Islands were fucking aliens? Even taking into account the asinine and underbaked as fuck pseudo-neo-pagan perspective the book chose to slap onto its ridiculous world-building, the Norse and Celtic calendars shouldn't be radically different, because again, the vast majority of the cultures of Europe and pagan religions of old pre-Christian Europe are and were somewhat related, just like most of our languages. And I mean, Christ, mitochondrial DNA studies show a solid half, at least, of Icelanders' settling female ancestors came from the UK and Ireland, because of all the British and Irish women Viking raiders carted off with them. There are Norse imports in Scottish Gaelic, and I mean, just look at all the Germanic and Scandinavian groups that went into other parts of Europe, changing its history forever. The Angles and Saxons in Britain, the Vandals, Goths, Visigoths, what have you, into Gallo-Roman Europe and Rome itself. And then heck, even on a broader global scale, you'll often find most cultures celebrate important events of the solar and or agricultural calendar around the same time, because we're all freaking humans. There's the nonsensical religious world-building of the book. Quote, they didn't cannibalize people for their bonfire festivals as a ritual to please their gods. So you're seriously telling me the Irish just all converted back to fucking druidic paganism in the span of what? 100 years at most? Really? Catholic? Mostly. I mean, Christian Ireland? Really? I could have bought weird and colorful doomsday cults. I could have bought splinter neo-druidic, neo-pagan factions in conflict with majority Catholic and Protestant groups. Because yes, there are officially recognized neo-pagan religions in the UK. Asatru is officially recognized in Iceland, and whilst I don't think any of those are officially recognized in the Republic of Ireland, there certainly are neo-pagans in Ireland. But like, a blanket conversion of the island of Ireland as a whole, then of Great Britain, within a century at most? Are you fucking kidding me? And same goes for the Norse, honestly, because like, whatever happened to all the Protestants in Scandinavia? Come the fuck on. Except time, once again, the Cornish was still English. Actual Cornish people might object to that, I'm just saying. And the English was still Celts, last she had heard. This one is so clunky, it's kind of hilarious. Also, it should be Britons, not English. If you actually want to go for like a Celtic motif, English comes from Angles, a Germanic group. Anyway, what I want to say is that the way linguistic hegemony was described in the book also didn't make a lick of sense, because why would it? You're telling me all of Ireland just magically ditched English for Irish, then forced it onto the people of the UK? Again? Really? Sure, bruv. But then, other Celtic languages, such as Welsh, the currently best performing Celtic language in terms of preservation and number of active speakers, I might add, so go Wales, those languages were also at times called Gaelic. And I was like, what? I'll be nice here and say there must have been an issue with the editing there. I guess. Another big one. Quote, I understand, she breathed. And she really did. It had been subtle at first, but she had started to notice the way the English were treated here as second-class citizens, as traitors to their own people. It reminded her of the way the Sami, the Finns, and the Danes were sometimes treated in Mimameid, because there's a hierarchy in Mimameid of like, some people are better Norse folks, some are worse. The Sami aren't even Norse to begin. Anyway. Okay. Where do I even start with this one? At best, this reads, to paraphrase my beloved Irish partner, as an edgy Irish-American teen's revenge fantasy played out in, again, EU4. I don't even think the author is Irish-American, just to be clear, but that is what my partner said. At worst, unfortunately, and coming from a work of SF literature presumably penned by an adult, this is actually bordering on the offensive, given the way it just blatantly handwaves away real history affecting real people, more or less to this day. In what universe can you write with a straight face a story that equates the English to the Sami with the Irish as the oppressing baddies? Just what the actual ever-loving fuck, though. And all the more so, given the book also stated the Celts were particularly good at guerrilla warfare. Wait for it. Just a teensy bit more. Using car bombs. Cherry on top of the crap cake, there was at one point a scene in a camp of Celtic peoples, and they were all, or nearly all, you guessed it, redheads! Give it up for gingers, that's right. I do actually mean that. My mum used to be a ginger. My partner's partly a ginger. Love gingers, great. What's more though, all these lovely people wore colourful tartans. Like, bestie, do you know the amount of fucking resources you'd need to make brightly coloured tartan cloth in a post-apocalyptic scenario? Where are all the fucking sheep and botanical sources of dye? Because the book made it pretty fucking clear most of the plants had gotten their shit kicked in by an ongoing volcanic winter. You can't have your cake and eat it too with this stuff if you want me to buy into it. Just no! And I'm pretty sure I said something very similar when I talked about the garbage world building in my review of Manhunt, if you want to check that out and have a laugh. Additionally, coloured clan tartan is a Scottish thing, not Irish, or Welsh, or Cornish, or Breton, I might add, or Galician as far as I know, or I don't know, Brythonic, as far as I know, if you wanted to revive that. It's also not that old of a tradition. Like, it doesn't go back 1,000 years, which doesn't make it less valid as a tradition now, mind you. Of course not. But still, I have to set the record straight here. And sure, Ireland does have the highest incidence of gingers. At least, that's what I came up to double check it. But that incidence only amounts to about 10% of the population. Not 90! And then it's like 6 to 8% in the UK as a whole. So if you think that a lot of gingers in the UK and Ireland, you are correct compared to everywhere else on Earth. Yes, but it's still not the majority. So, talk about stereotyping. Jesus fucking Christ. I am very glad I managed to DNF this one, because it just really started to get to me after a while. A lot of the ridiculous world building and over-the-top stereotyping is so bad, it's kind of funny, but when it really got going with the whole Irish Celts are good at guerrilla warfare and raiding Viking style because car bombs, and are now oppressing the English just like the Swedes oppressed the Sami shtick, I was just like, what the fuck am I reading? And to be crystal clear here, I don't actually believe the author set out to offend anyone or be offensive towards cultures she's not a part of. I don't think she's a bad person. I don't think she's evil. I don't think she should be cancelled. I don't think she should stop writing. We're all on the same page about this. Like, don't harass an author when they make what is probably, in all likelihood, a genuine mistake, lack of research. It happens. But you do have to point it out. There are a lot of important ongoing conversations about cultural appropriation, or rather, what I like to call cultural misappropriation in storytelling, about the ways we integrate elements, aspects, history from cultures not our own in speculative world building. These days, at least for now, chiefly center on non-Western cultures from what we call the global South, but ultimately the standards we aspire to follow in order to respectfully take inspiration from foreign cultures in our fiction writing should be applied consistently to every living culture, including European ones. And this is something that was discussed quite a bit at Worldcon last year. It was hosted in Glasgow, in Scotland, and there were quite a few panels about Scottish culture and how writers who aren't Celtic use Celtic cultural hallmarks, symbols, Celtic languages in their fantasy world building, their science fiction world building. I mean, I know that freaking Rebecca Yarros kind of got into hot water for the way she uses Scottish Gaelic names in her books. And those conversations need to happen too. The cultures of Northern Europe, including those of Scandinavia, are real, living cultures. The remaining Celtic cultures of Europe are real, living cultures, no less deserving of careful consideration and respect than any other culture. That goes for language as well, especially when you factor colonization by the British into the equation. Yeah, you can't, or I mean you shouldn't, just act like the complex intertwined histories of the UK and Ireland didn't happen. Like the famine didn't happen. Like the Troubles didn't happen, and have the Irish colonize the English in the most unbelievable way possible for shits and giggles. It's well, for one thing, ridiculous, and yes! I contend it's borderline offensive, especially with the freaking car bombing shtick. Jesus fucking Christ, again. The Troubles, very specifically, aren't ancient history in the fucking slightest. My granddad, my mother's dad, was stationed in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. My partner's parents left Ireland because of the Troubles and then came back. We, so my partner and I, anyone our age, were both born only a few years before the Good Friday Agreement was signed in 1998. And a lot of people were, with good reason, really worried about the border when Brexit fucking happened. This shit is no joke, and it impacts the political and social landscape of Ireland, and then in conjunction with the UK, to this day. So again, it's already one thing to use Celtic languages for shits and giggles or for your fancy well building and just do it without any kind of respect, sensitivity, consideration. But when you actually reference very real, delicate history like this, come on. Again, I don't think the author is evil. I hope she continues writing. But this is an invitation to do better. You need to do better with this kind of stuff. I discussed this book at length with my partner when I read it, which greatly helped because, like I said, I was kind of losing my mind over it, so shout out to him. But hey, at least we shared a few laughs together, so that was nice. On a more serious note, his perspective was invaluable in helping to solidify my conclusion that the world building in this book was indeed garbage, and yeah, mildly offensive in places. For the sake of fairness, however, and in addition to what I already said about the fact I don't think this author should be cancelled or harassed, I don't think she's evil, I don't think she meant to do this. But so in addition to that, I'll concede that maybe, just maybe, things get better in the second half of the book, or that the theming, if there is any appreciable theming to speak of, makes it all worth it, somehow. But I certainly couldn't care to find out. What I read scored, at most, a weak 4 out of 10 and left a really bad taste in my mouth, that's for sure. So that concludes my review of the DNF'd The Mimameid Solution written by Catherine Kempf. Oh. Still, I hope you found this review interesting, engaging, entertaining, all the usual good things, and on that final note, I hope you all have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you all at some point in the next video, but until then, bye-bye.